name's Tim Riley, and I currently live in Austin, Texas, and I'm a personal trainer. And I've been blessed with the opportunity to tell a little bit of my story as it pertains to my struggles with mental health. And so I think it's best for me to start about as far back as I can remember. And so I remember being a child, and there was always tension in my home. I remember staying up late and listening to my parents fight and argue. And I remember always having a sense of never feeling safe. And I always felt alone. And it was something that I could never quite put my finger on. I mean, I remember trying to go and stay the night at other friends' houses, even as a little kid, and I'd be too scared to stay. My parents would have to come pick me up. Something always felt like it was missing. And I was just perpetually afraid. And as I got older, my parents' relationship began to deteriorate, and they began to fight and argue more, and eventually they got a divorce, and the leading causes for that were, or I should say the leading cause was my father's drug use. And it had gotten to a place where it was really bad, and my parents' relationship, it was unsalvageable, and I'm grateful for that today. At the time, it seemed like a crushing blow, but I'm really glad that I was able to grow up outside of that environment. And unfortunately, things didn't improve altogether, though. For me and my little brother, I have a brother who's a year and a half younger. We're really close. We talk almost every day now. And I like to refer to our relationship like you might think of someone that you survived a shipwreck with. My father, his drug use, as my parents split, increased dramatically, and he would, he would neglect us and get high and lock us out of the bedroom for days in a row and not feed us, and he's unable to take care of himself, and so he's unable to take care of us. And the divorce itself was very bumpy and difficult. Me and my brother were often pitted against one parent or another. And so there was a lot of mistrust, and what I've learned now later in life is that when you can't learn to trust your parents, it's really hard to trust other people. And when you don't feel loved or cared or protected by your parents, you seek it out in other places. And so as me and my brother got older, my mother, the condition stayed the same. My father continued to use. My mother started dating, and she had a type, and it was, usually pretty intense, a lot of verbal and emotional abuse, a lot. And so a time came where my parents thought it would be wise for me and my brother to go into therapy, into counseling, because we were both struggling, obviously struggling in school. And so we did that, and this is my first encounter with learning that you not only can you not trust your parents, but you can't trust anyone else either. And we went to this therapist for an extended period of time, and I lied every day to his face when he asked me if I was okay and if I had anything I wanted to talk about, and I told him no. And because I'd learned growing up that if I share my emotions or my thoughts and feelings, that it was more than likely going to be met with anger or resistance. So finally I went out on a limb, and really it wasn't by choice. I broke down and started crying because I knew that I was going to have to go back home to the house where my mom's then boyfriend lived with us. And I broke down, and the therapist drew me in, and he asked me to tell me why I was crying, and I told him that I hate him, and I told him how abusive he was towards me and my brother, and I spilled my guts. And what transpired was the therapist, in making an effort to make my mother aware, told my mother what was going on, because he was operating under the assumption that she would take action and do the right thing. And I do believe now today, with what I've learned, that my mom did what she thought was best for me with the tools she had at the time. And at the time, that meant that she told her then boyfriend. And so basically what happened as a byproduct of that is that things did not improve for me, they got worse. And he made me sit down with him and my mother and have a conversation about how I shouldn't lie to the therapist about the things he says to me. And my mother sat there knowing that everything I said was true and said nothing to stand up and defend me. And that's one example of what became very apparent and evident to me, that no one was going to stand up for me, and that was the confirmation I needed to know that the feeling that I thought that I was alone my entire life was real. I was really alone. And so as the years went on, there were more failed attempts to reach out and connect. Eventually, the entire time all this stuff's going on, I go to a Christian private school, and my home life didn't look a lot like the rest of my friends' home life. And so I learned real quick at an early age that if you wanted to get by, that you had to lie. And so I started living a double life at a young age to deflect what was really going on at home. And there was a lot of shame surrounding the fact that my father was a drug addict. I was aware of that from the age of 7. My mom wasn't shy about telling me what the problem was. And so I have this internal struggle of who I'm supposed to be at school and what's really going on at home, and just this crushing, devastating knowing that I'm alone and that there's no way out of this thing. And then on my 12th birthday, something really special happened. My mom took us to the grocery store, me and my best friend at the time, and we talked her into buying us a 6-pack of daiquiris. And she relented, and we went back to my grandma's house, who was cooking dinner for me, and me and my friend, we started to drink them. Well, my friend drank half of his, said it tasted terrible and didn't want it. I drank the rest of them. And I didn't like the way it tasted, but I really loved the way it made me feel. And I'll never forget, and I get chills thinking about it right now, walking out onto my grandma's porch. Everyone else was inside, and I was completely alone out there. But I never felt more a part of something in my entire life. And for a moment, for the first time, all of the fear, all of the anxiety, and all the things that I'd been running from or incapable of articulating finally stopped. And I could breathe. And that changed my life. Every opportunity I got after that to change or alter the way I felt, I took advantage of it. The very next time I drank, and before I get to that, that first time drinking, that moment of feeling a part of feeling warm, of feeling safe, of feeling loved, of feeling protected, didn't last very long. I got sick, real sick, dog sick. But those consequences, as awful as they were nowhere near as important or as impactful as the good that I took away from that experience. That small time frame where I just had enough time to breathe without the elephant on my chest was worth any amount of consequence. And that proves to be true throughout the rest of my life, because any opportunity I got to drink or to alter my feelings with chemicals, I took advantage of it. And just like I did the first time I drank, while everyone else seemed to be fine having half a drink or two, I needed all of them. And there was no other way to do it. It just didn't make sense to me. So getting into 13, 14, I start getting arrested pretty regularly. And then, of course, I start failing drug tests because I can't not get high. Can't not get high. And I would drink and use up until the day of my drug test and try and drink gallons of water and do all these things to try and pass the drug test. And so I really, the disease, the mental disease of addiction had its hooks in me the moment I took my first drink. And really, as I look back over the course of my life, was really, it was already there long before I ever took the drink. I was just a match waiting to be struck. And so I'm getting arrested left and right. The school, the Christian private school, finds out about what's going on at my home life, which at this time my mom's new boyfriend was just a few years older than me, and he was a drug dealer. And so my house became the local dope spot. So on any given night, I'd have anywhere between 10 and 15 people that I may or may not know using, buying, selling drugs on a nightly basis. And I got to tell you, for someone whose outlet became those things, it seemed like a pretty awesome deal. As I look back on it now, I realize that there could have not been a more dysfunctional environment to spend my teenage years in. But in that environment, and now leaving the only structure after the very nice school kindly asked me to not return, I all but dropped out of high school. I missed more days of school than I ever made. And I started using, smoking, drinking. If I wasn't doing one, I was doing the other almost every single day. The only structure that I had in my life up to that point was gone, and it wasn't long before I started selling drugs myself. And that was the gasoline on the fire, the dumpster fire that my life already was. And once I hit that place where I was making enough money to support my habit and allow it to go to places that I didn't even know were possible, things really fell apart. I couldn't keep a job, and most of the time I didn't feel like I needed one because of the money I was making. And my using was daily and to the point where, I might not sleep for several days at a time, almost on a weekly basis, up using drugs and drinking. And needless to say, my mental condition was a nightmare. And any amount of time that I spent sober or not under the influence was virtually felt like just a constant panic attack. I would do things while under the influence that I would tell myself weren't me. But I couldn't live with the guilt and shame of the things I would do and say, and so I would go out and try and forget about it the next night. And I lived in that cycle for years. And I would have the brief periods where I would get a job or renew the things with the girlfriend and start working out and make efforts to get healthy, and just long enough to fool people in my life that I might be getting better or changing something, usually about a week. And then, the idea would come to me that maybe a beer doesn't sound so bad. Eventually, I got to a place where I'd ruined another relationship. I was about to lose another job. I went out drinking again when I said I wouldn't. I went out doing drugs again like I said I wouldn't. And I'm in a place with people that I can't stand and don't want to be around, and there's no way out. And for the first time in my life, I realized in a wave of emotion that my life was never going to get better if something didn't change dramatically. And in that moment, I wept, and it was like for the first time in my life, all the pain that I've been trying to run from was real, and I could feel it. And I cried, and I had said lots of, my mother was Hindu and had her own spiritual practice, and I went to this Christian private school growing up, and so I saw all these other people who were happy, and I don't know what I thought. I don't know if I thought that God just wasn't real and that all of that was a lie and it was fake, or if I thought maybe if he was real, he certainly didn't give a shit about me. And I'd said lots of prayers before this moment, but most of them were usually connected to, God, if you can help me get out of this cop car, I swear I won't do it again. Or, God, I took too much and I'm pretty certain I'm gonna die. If you let me live, I won't do this again, which was always a lie. This was different. The only thing that came to me was, help. Please help. And in a weird way, I'd been trying to find the help that I always needed in other people and substances and things and money. And someone that was with me at that time said, is there anything I can do to help? And I said, no. There's nothing anyone could do to help. So from that moment, I woke up the next day, I didn't feel any different, but something shifted, something changed in my mind. And from that moment on, I was no longer able to lie to myself and say that this was all just fun or I was trying to have a good time. It became very evident and apparent to me from that moment on that none of this was fun, and it hadn't been for a really long time. And I could no longer enjoy myself. As long as I was able to enjoy even just a minute, and I would wait for the moment. I'd be drinking and using drugs, and I would have one brief moment where everything would be okay. That same moment that I felt on that back porch in my grandma's house so many years ago. And I would wait for it, and I would feel it, and then it was gone. I knew that moment was never going to happen again. And so, okay. So from that moment on, I knew that I could never find that feeling again. And something radically shifted in my mind, and I knew that if I didn't do something drastic, that I would end up dead or in jail, like a lot of the people that I'd grown up around and had been close to in my life. And so I decided to go to rehab. I had a friend who was kind enough to help me get into a treatment facility, and I went there for 30 days. And while I was there, I started to recognize and realize that I had a lot of unresolved trauma, and that I had been struggling with PTSD, and had no way of knowing these things and no way of coping with them. And then that, coupled with the disease of addiction, I really had no shot at happiness. So, having that experience at the treatment facility, where for the first time in my adult life, I had the proper care that I really needed to start working through some of the trauma and underlying mental health issues that were driving my addiction. And also that was the longest period of time I had ever been sober since the age of 14. And so it was quite eye-opening. And at the time it felt like a total victory, but a lot of work laid ahead. And I stayed sober for about a year, and during that time I continued to do therapy, which was just beyond impactful in my life and in the lives of people that cared and loved about me, and is still impacting my life today. And that, coupled with a program of recovery, I was able to stay sober for a little bit over a year. And as life got better, I stopped utilizing those same tools. And once again, my mental health and emotional health deteriorated very quickly. During that time, I was having a little girl, so I was facing fatherhood for the first time. I had moved cities, and I had moved away from the support group that I had found initially getting sober and the therapist that I'd been working with. And, I thought that my worst low point was that moment when I thought I'd had my last drink and I broke down and wept. But that actually turned out not to be true. My worst moments, my worst pain and anguish lied ahead of me. And for the first time in my life, I was diagnosed with moderate to severe depression. And I was not suicidal in the sense where I'd made a plan, but I was fairly convinced that my life and my newly born daughter's life and everyone else's life would be a lot better if I wasn't in it. And for the first time, I had the right treatment surrounding my mental health, and I was able to take medication for a period of time, which would potentially save my life. I was able to get my foot back in the door and give me ground to stand on while I underwent cognitive behavioral therapy. And from that time, things have continued to get better. And I can say that during that time, it allowed me to get to a place where I was able to get sober again. I just got 2 years on my birthday a few weeks ago. And over this past 2 years, it's basically been continue to work in therapy and unpack all of those things that happened to me in my childhood and the way that they're still showing up today. But the winning strategy for me has been continuing to utilize a therapist that I trust. Because of what happened to me in the past, it was really hard for me to open up, especially to a therapist, because that trust had been broken. But getting to that place where I'm able to confidently and clearly and honestly communicate what I'm feeling and thinking on a regular basis to someone who genuinely is invested in my health and well-being has been a total game changer in my life. And not just my life, but I'm a better father, I'm a better son, I'm a better employer, I'm a better employee, I'm a better brother, because of the time and energy and effort that I've been able to put into therapy and working with others and working a program of recovery. And so, today, I no longer struggle with depression. I do still from time to time have things come up from my childhood, some things that happened to me and my little brother, where it feels like a wave just rushes over me. And I can't get it out of my head, and it can feel at times in that moment like I'm stuck and I'm never going to be able to get out. But because of the last 2 years and because of good therapy and because of powerful people in my life who have gone through similar experiences and been able to come out on the other side, I can lean on those people to reach out and make contact and get through that tough time. And every single one of those experiences that I have gives me more and more evidence that the next time it happens, I'm gonna be okay. And that gives me hope. And I'll say this, what I've come to understand about the things that have happened to me in my life and the struggles that I've had with my mental health is, in a lot of ways, today it's been the greatest gift of my life. I find that I'm able to have empathy for other people on a level that is incredibly deep. I'm able to feel more connected to those around me. People in my life often feel very comfortable, especially if they know what I've been through and the things that I've had had to do to work to get to the place where I'm at today, to open up to me. And that level of connectivity really makes my life filled with purpose. Also because of my experiences with drug and alcohol use and addiction, I'm uniquely qualified to be able to reach out to other people who are still struggling and put myself in a position to help be a guiding light for them and show them the things that I did, that I was able to do to get sober and change my life. And hopefully that they're able to latch onto some of that and do it for themselves. So all in all, it's been a learning and growing experience, and a lot of it has been brutally painful, but everything that I have worked for, that I want in my life, that I have right now, the good things, the relationship that I have with my little girl, she doesn't know any of her daddy's struggles. She'll never, God willing, ever see her father in the condition that I lived most of my life. She's never gonna grow up in a home that like I grew up in, and I have all of that to thank for that prayer that I said that day, and God showing up in my life in a really big, powerful way, and putting people like therapists, like sponsors in my life who have been able to direct and guide me through this whole process. So I guess if I was to finish it, this whole talk, it would be that the common thread throughout my whole life is that I was alone. And I assumed, because of a few or maybe a lot of experiences that showed me that I was on my own, that I was never gonna be able to get help, and that I was doomed and destined to try and figure this thing out on my own. And nothing could be farther from the truth. What I've found is that as a man, one of my most powerful, impactful, and meaningful things I can do is open up and be vulnerable and give other people the opportunity to help me. That is a blessing. It's a blessing to give someone else an opportunity to be helpful to you. And so that's what I hope this talk has been able to do for you today. I hope that if this does that this does somehow help you in some way, and let you know that you're not alone, and that the help is out there if you're willing to reach out for it. So thank you.